This is the infamous and probably one of the most avoided ingredients in cooking.
Some people would say it might just be easier for you to avoid the whole thing and not use MSG.
We don't take any MSG.
Having too much of it actually leads to adverse health effects like hair loss.
I think it's unhealthy.
I actually feel quite bloated and there's a lot of water retention.
Can you eat MSG? No.
They said, don't put MSG in the food. I know you guys use it in China, but you live in America now.
The headache, palpitations, nervousness, dizziness.
So you probably heard of MSG from your parents, family, or your teachers saying that you shouldn't add this to your food because it's unhealthy and it's dangerous. It may be due to the many articles, news, and studies saying it's the cause of many illnesses. But is it really that dangerous to your health, or has it been condemned as such? Well, we're gonna find out if that really is the case, but before that, we really got to know what is MSG in the first place and where did it come from? Let's go back to 1908 Japan. A chemist by the name of Kikune Ikeda, well, that's actually me because I couldn't find videos of him back then, so this is where my bad acting comes in. Well, anyway, he was fascinated by his wife's cooking of a seaweed broth, having no meat but having a distinctive meaty flavor, and he described this flavor to what we know now as umami.
The umami.
Umami
Tastes like umami.
through umami.
Umami.
He then discovers a new way of enjoying tastier food by extracting this substance from the seaweed, which he later discovered to be glutamic acid, an amino acid, which in simpler terms, it's a substance that can be found in basically in all sorts of proteins and organic ingredients. He then turned this substance into glutamate, the powder form that we all know now today. It's a more versatile way of isolating the flavor. He then combined this with sodium and therefore invented what we know now as MSG, or Monosodium Glutamate. And as he later started to sell this new idea to the public, it became an instant success all around Asia. And due to its popularity, it was then exported to the US and many countries. Also having been incorporated in a lot of Asian cuisines, but more commonly in a lot of processed foods.
It must produce more food than ever before to supply our own.
Have soup for lunch. Good.
Potato chips in this.
Pringles, new Pringles, potato chips.
As good as they crunch. Doritos nacho cheese. Just one.
The substance was successfully distributed and loved by the majority. Because this flavor enhancer made a lot of otherwise was bland and boring food back then was now irresistible and even addictive. It was all well and good until an incident in 1968 where a doctor by the name of Robert Homan Kwok, also couldn't find any videos of him, so that's also me. So after eating Chinese food in the US, saying he experienced a numbness in the back of his neck, radiating into his arms, and also experiencing palpitations. But maybe it was a little less dramatic than that. He then proceeded to write a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine of his experience from the meal having MSG. It got me wondering, this should all be legit, right? Because the dude's a doctor, and to make it more compelling, he was a senior research investigator, and it sounded pretty credible. Well, it turns out that this was only a letter, not a dissertation, not an official study. It had no concrete evidence. It was basically just a theory, a mere observation. It had no real basis if MSG was the real reason for it all. But once this article termed the Chinese restaurant syndrome got out, it created a very bad stigma towards MSG and a lot of Asian restaurants. This is what led to people avoiding and ultimately fearing Chinese food. But in reality, it wasn't just Chinese food that had MSG in it.
And take it from the Colonel, Kentucky Fried Chicken is finger-licking good.
Chick-fil-A, the boneless breast of chicken we're famous for.
Now, there were actual studies of MSG saying that high dosage of MSG injected to the bloodstream overstimulates the brain neurons and can cause damage or lesions. But who in their right mind would even inject high dosage of MSG directly into their blood? There were a lot of flawed studies surrounding MSG, which only made it look way worse than it already is, which fueled more hate towards MSG. Luckily, there was an official study from the FDA back in 1995. It was stated that a number of individuals, not all of them, but a few number of people did actually experience mild symptoms of numbness, nausea, and many more after eating more than 3 grams of MSG on an empty stomach. And again, I don't know who would eat that much MSG in a single day without any other food. So I guess Dr. Kwok did have some legitimate observations of MSG from his letter, but this also tells us that he might have ate more than 3 grams of MSG from that one single meal alone. And 3 grams is a lot. It's almost a spoonful of MSG. Eating that much salt in a day has far worse effects. Because if you ate more than the recommended 2 grams of salt a day, according to the World Health Organization, it increases the risk of high blood pressure and heart problems. And you're probably saying that your whole diet doesn't not even consist of any MSG in the first place. Well, check again, because the majority of the food you buy in groceries, not only in restaurants, contain MSG. Because the main ingredient in MSG is glutamate. And glutamate can be found in all sorts of basic ingredients, such as cheese, tomatoes, nuts, juices, chicken, seaweed, where MSG was discovered. It's even in breast milk. Who would have thought that breast milk would consist mostly of this stuff? So imagine avoiding giving your newborn breast milk because it has glutamate in it. Another reason for MSG having a bad reputation is because it makes junk foods, which are cheap, processed, and unhealthy, and probably deep fried numerous times, and it tastes addictively good. And by eating too much of this is what causes us to intake loads of MSG with it. Well, anyway, it's not just MSG that contributes to the additives of junk foods, and also preservatives, which are proven to be toxic. And as of today, the FDA even considers MSG as safe for consumption. And even having not found any significant research that clearly tells MSG is dangerous, it has been far too late and has now been deemed as unhealthy and dangerous by the majority of the public.
That's me.
But regardless of its bad reputation in the market, they have eventually found other ways to sell it by hiding the word MSG or by marketing them as other names. Now that we know the facts, knowing MSG is safe, why don't we just add it to everything to enhance the flavor? Well, not exactly. Let's not forget that MSG still has salt in it. You know, the monosodium part. Adding MSG to an already salted food means doubling down on salt. And too much salt, like I've said, is unsafe. So if you're seasoning your food with MSG, try to avoid using salt and vice versa. And for the OCD people out there, how much MSG exactly is too much? Well, according to the European Food Safety Authority, daily intake of MSG should not exceed 30 milligrams of MSG per kilogram of weight. Like for example, I'm 60 kilograms, you multiply that by 30, then that should be your daily MSG limit. Mine is at 1,800 milligrams or 1.8 grams a day. Like all other foods out there, eating too much of anything is definitely bad for you. Even clean water is toxic if you exceed the amount of water that the body can handle. So the key to all of this is eat and drink in moderation. So if you're sensitive to it, lessen it even more. And speaking of moderation, finding the right amount of sleep is also important, as to not having enough is bad for your health, and surprisingly too much of it is also bad for you. Check this video out on how many hours of sleep do you really need. And yeah, that's it.